Great.
Okay, should we go ahead and get started then? 1:05, and I think if anybody comes or anybody wants to join, they certainly can. We appreciate everybody being here. As we said before, this is something we haven't done before, but something I really feel like that we should always incorporate City Council and Planning Commission to have some feedback together. And we'll talk about this at the very end, but like to start having these quarterly where everyone is here together and we can discuss. Hopefully at another time frame. I know this ended up being maybe a little different time, but we appreciate you being here. Just one thing I wanted to say just right at the beginning, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but there is the Legislative Policy Committee that has to do with the Utah League of City and Towns. And we are allowed to have 3 voting members on this committee. And when I looked to see who our voting members currently were, it showed Jared Preisler. So I don't know if we've had any current voting members, so that would have been some time. Jared Preisler, I know.
I talked with Liam at the last league convention that we went to, and he told us that we should get some people.
Yeah. So one thing about that is, and so let me know after if you're interested. We can have 3. It could be chief, it could be staff. It can be anybody here could be on it. There, could be 3. There is a little bit of a time commitment during the legislative session. There's like January 22nd, 29th, February 5th, 12th, 20th, 26th. But they do have a Zoom option. You can go to the Capitol to do it. It's actually not actually in the Capitol, but the Senate quarters next door. And then once a month they have, is where they will talk about different things. So I really feel like this would be something good if anyone is interested in doing that. So I planned on submitting my name, but if there's 2 others that want to, more can be on it. We can only just have 3 voting members. So I feel like anytime we can have a say, we are better off doing that. So just let me know after, and you can just give me who would be interested in doing that. Okay, so one of the things we would like, and today is just a discussion. It's just to get input. It's just to get feelings. It has nothing to do with us being able to vote on anything, but it certainly is a good time to get together and have a discussion. And so we're going to turn some time to Bryant. He's just going to, and then Reed or Brandon, whoever wants to, and then we're just going to discuss some things that we feel like is important for us too. So
Sounds good. So just to reemphasize, this is just, we're not making any decisions. Well, I guess we are kind of prompting those decisions to be made. We know that we need to make some changes with a lot of our ordinances, and this is one of the ordinances that we don't want to get sued on, and so we want to make some changes, but we want to get kind of some feedback, and then we can take that feedback, and then Reed and Brandon can help us to work on our ordinances or our policies and procedures, and then we will make some recommendations to update our ordinances.
Will you unmute yourself so Bryce can hear you?
Okay. So maybe, can you... Maybe, because if I unmute, it's going to give that feedback. But he's not picking me up.
No, because we're both muted. And he's on Zoom.
Oh, probably because...
Because that's not...
Do we need to mute that?
Well, that's unplugged from my computer.
Okay, let's try this. Does that work? No. Okay.
Oh, please.
He doesn't hear when you unmute? I think that would work.
Well, we're
Yeah.
both
He
muted.
hears, but then her computer starts playing feedback.
Oh.
So...
Hi, Bryce. Sorry, we can't unmute our computers. I'm just going to put you on my phone and just put you in front of Bryant so you can hear what he's talking about. Yes. Oh, it's totally fine. Okay. I'll just put you on speaker if you want to mute yourself. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So recently we've had, every once in a while we have people come in and they inquire about zoning changes, and it seems like recently we've had a fair amount of people that have come in and asked about it. And then at our last planning commission, there's actually somebody who decided yes, they were going to pull the trigger, pay the money to open the plan, and as staff we dug into it to find out what that process looks like, and we couldn't find a real clear path to go forth. And so we found our process was not well defined, and maybe it was just overlooked or whatnot. So if you look at our general plan, the 2022 general plan that we have, one of our goals or things that we wanted to do was to develop a list of criteria in accordance with the Land Use Management and Development Act for reviewing and analyzing zone change requests. And that's something that we've needed to do. We haven't really done anything with that. And now that we're getting some people to question what that process looks like, and we thought, well, this is probably a good place to start revising some of our ordinances and seeing what needs to happen. So one question was the annual review. In our report, we say we will do an annual review, and that's all it really says. We don't really have when it is open for discussion, how it gets open for discussion, how long it's for discussion, what items are we considering? Are we considering just in general subdivisions that have happened and affecting other areas around them? Are we looking at commercial? Are we looking at schools and churches? Are we just looking to see if our definitions are good? What is it that we're really considering? And then the timing, how long and how often? I mean, we say annual review, but when is that happening, and what does that look like? We also had questions, and so that was one thing, and then the other category was opening by the landowner, and that's what really kind of is driving this discussion. Where does the process even begin? Right now, it just says that it can be opened by the city council, but should it be looked at by the planning commission first and then recommended to the city council? Does the city council just decide whether to open it or not? I mean, it's pretty unclear. Also, how long is it open? Is it open for a certain period of time? Is it just open for that one item that's being discussed? Right now we don't really ask what the benefit is to the city. That's something that we think we should probably have on there. Another big item is the difference between residential zoning and commercial zoning. Right now we just have the plan, it can be open. We don't really know the process of how, so we kind of wanted some clarification on that. We feel like there is a huge difference between residential and commercial. The commercial obviously will bring a different benefit to the city than the residential. So we wanted to maybe separate those two and make the process a little bit clearer. That way, if two people come in and submit, we're not denying one and we accept the other one. And I mean, we need to have these rules in place so that we make sure we're operating correctly and treating everyone the same. And then another question was, once it gets open, so say 3 people want to open the general plan, and the city decides to open it. Someone pays right now the fee is $500 to pay to open the general plan. So person A comes in, they pay the $500. We decide yes, we're going to open it. It gets open. The question is, can person B and person C come in and also have their items looked at? Right now, it's really ambiguous as to that, and so we started looking at that. So, does each person have to open the plan, A, B, and C? And does each person pay $500, or does the first person pay and the other 2 get a free load off of it? Or do we split the cost between the 3? It's really unclear. So those are kind of the items that we thought we need to nail down our process a little bit more. And we want to have a discussion, and like I say, then our legal counsel will help us consider that. And a little bit more to drill into the commercial. So the future commercial zone. I highlighted this area because it's just the main commercial. We have a little bit more up north, but this is the main commercial that we have. And you can see it's just kind of a broad path. It's not specific for each parcel. It's just kind of that general area. And so then we have some questions as to that. So of course we want to have some commercial come into the city. This is where we want it. We want to plan everything out, and it's been identified. But we really need to attract some of the commercial to help offset some of the fees of running the city. And so, this is where we want our commercial to be. So a big question that we have is there a potential to grant higher density in the remaining residential? And so what that means is they're just on this map, you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit more here, and you can see that area that has been identified as the commercial. I should say the commercial is the red, the residential is the purple, is the 0.75. And so that red swath kind of cuts a lot of parcels in half. So like this remaining parcel, this little teeny bit here, all these little parcels are kind of in the future kind of dual. They have residential and they have commercial. So when somebody comes in and says, oh, I want to do some commercial, what happens to that in the back? So we've been talking a little bit as if that parcel comes in and says, I'd like to, so say one of those parcels is 10 acres, and they come in and say, I could put, right now I'm zoned for 1 acre lots, so I could have 10 lots, or it's the 0.75, so I could have a little bit more than that, get the future on that. But if I bring commercial in the front, what if I take what I could get if I had, so say they could have 15 doors, or 15 housetops, or 15 residents, if they did the 0.75. What if they did the commercial in the front, but still got 15 residents in the back, so have a higher residence in the back? Is that acceptable? Because that's a little bit more palatable to them to bring in to bring in the commercial, because then they can still have the same residential in the back, and it kind of offsets their cost in bringing that in. Does that make sense? To kind of give up a little bit on our end to bring in the commercial.
It makes sense, but this is my district.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have been calling around my district, and my district's very dense as it is. It's one of the more dense
Correct.
districts in Hooper, and they aren't all that thrilled with that proposal. So my question is, are we doing this for a certain amount of people, or are we just going to disregard my district? I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I was going to mention, that idea of not increasing doors is, we've done that before by Sinclair. When we originally put that zone, the commercial zone east of that, when it was zoned 1 acre lots, and I'll just throw out a number, say that you could put 10 homes in there.
Mm-hmm.
We said, well, if you'll go ahead and put a commercial zone as part of the property you own, we'll still let you put 10 doors in there. You could still put 10 homes. But now, because part of it's in commercial, the remaining lots would be smaller. So it is, if you look at the zoning's not 1 acre by Sinclair anymore. It's a little smaller than that.
Yeah.
But it didn't increase the density of the residents, see. And that was the trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed pretty palatable,
Yeah.
but this has been a few years ago. But
Yeah, and they
So-
were okay with more commercial in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and lesser, a higher density.
But again, the density doesn't increase as far as residents. See,
Right.
we're not talking higher density, we're just talking the same. But part of that land would be now have a store front instead of a few homes, see.
Yeah. So right now, that's kind of an unknown that we need to look at. Another question is, do we allow bleed over in contiguous property? So what this means is, this is totally theoretical, so I just picked this one So don't think that this is being proposed or anything. So this is up by the Holiday Oil, right? So Holiday Oil is Roy City right there. But right across the street, you can see that we have some commercial property. So what if somebody came in there and said, I want to develop that, but it's too small. Like I want to bring in whatever it is, but I don't have enough parking lot. So if they wanted to hypothetically develop this, could, if they either purchased or they were the landowner to the south, because it's contiguous of that commercial, could that be extended down where we don't have a hard, fast rule? I mean, it wasn't like the commercial was set to be 75 feet from the center line of the road. It was just kind of this general idea.
Those red areas that we put on the future land use map don't have any defined depth to them. It's just kind of a line that we kind of just drew
Just
through
picked.
there, but it isn't a defined area.
Correct. And this one's kind of interesting because that line, over here it's cutting the parcel. Sorry, Bryce, you can't see me pointing here, but on the left side, just above the word south, the residential and commercial gets split. But then over here where I have the hypothetical, it's on that property line. So, we don't have anything right now saying that is acceptable, but we don't have anything saying it's not acceptable. So that's something that we'd like to kind of get a little bit more definition. That way somebody can't just come in and try suing us because they feel like we're being swayed by whatever is coming in or the people coming in, or we want to have something a little bit more solid in what we're talking about. So jumping back to that other slide with the items that we would like to define. So this is kind of so these are the items that we'd like to talk a little bit more about, have some discussion on, and then legal will work with staff, and then we'll generate what we need to, and then it'll come up for items to vote on. But right now, when the annual review happens, is it we say it's open for discussion, but what does that really mean? And as staff, we kind of feel like it's a discussion, not open for changes. Maybe we have we just have everyone talk about it and come up with what that looks like.
In our discussions as the planning commission, we scheduled and put on the calendar that each February we would look at the general plan with the eyes of, is it working for us? Are there things that need to be changed? So we would be reviewing the general plan annually, which is in one of our tables that says that's what the planning commission is required to do. But with the thoughts that, are there things that need to be changed? And if there are, then we'll need to break those out and then make recommendation. My understanding was we break those out and make recommendation to city council that they consider making these changes. And how to make those changes, I don't know whether that you have to actually open the general plan and change them, or if, I don't know the legalities of all of that. But from the planning commission, our plan is, and it should be on our agenda for February, for us as a commission to have a discussion regarding, is this plan working? Have we found things that we need to change?
Okay.
My understanding is just a tiny bit different. We have strategies that we put in the general plan, and my understanding was annually, as a planning commission, we were going to look at the general plan, look at what we're doing, and making sure that what we're doing is in line with those strategies. Not necessarily to change the plan, but to make sure that what we are doing is in line with the plan. Otherwise, if we're looking at changing the plan every year, we're not really giving it a chance to take root and see if those strategies are working. And so we also talked about, the different strategies that were set forth in here, the possibility of forming smaller committees with maybe a member of the planning commission, a member of the city council, as well as a community member or two that may be versed in that area so that we could kind of make sure those strategies are taking place, because there's a whole bunch of them. So it's going to take more than just the planning commission and the city council probably to make sure that's happening. But I never felt like it was, we're reviewing it every year so that we can make changes to the plan, just making sure we are sticking to the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I know
And I agree with Amanda.
when we first started out, you know, opening the general plan, there was all this discussion on, well, what if? Well, what if we do this? Well, what if we have a person come in and request this? Well, pretty soon, you have so many what ifs, you didn't go anywhere. It's just a big ball of what ifs. So that ties in with what Amanda said. You know, we define strategies based on feedback from, you know, the meetings that we had when citizens came in and said, this is the type of community that we would like. And I think it helped define what we hoped Hooker would look like in 20 years. You know, not every, you know, because there's no way you could change. You'd be going in so many directions. Nothing would ever have a clear direction.
Okay.
And there's always new stuff that comes up. I know there's new ways of doing things. But anyway, that's...
And opening the general plan, I mean, for the most part, people are able to take care of things with the request for a rezone change. I mean, opening the general plan is a huge endeavor and very costly. And I don't see the need for the most part that it really requires that. So it's unusual to have people requesting this.
So we don't have to open the general plan for rezone request?
No, not the reason.
Well,
It
depends on-
yes or no?
Depends on what reason the zone they're asking
It depends,
for.
right? If it's not in the future land use map to
Yeah.
be able to accommodate that rezone request, then you would have
Yeah.
to deny it unless they reopen the general plan, and it would be. And a lot of times, I think when we say reopen the general plan, it's not reopening it like we do every 5 years. It's more of a very specific, targeted reopening related to this. Well, I guess that's kind of what we're talking about. But that's the way I see it. It's not like reopening the entire thing. But yeah, you're right. It would be dependent on what that rezone was. Because if they came into you guys saying, I want a rezone, and it's not on that future land use map, you have to say no. So it just depends. But maybe that's okay, because you don't want it. You just did it, and that's what you laid out. And so kind of the format.
Yeah, I feel like we need to have an opportunity for our plan to function. I mean, why have the plan if we're going to change it every 6 months?
Yeah,
Well, I have a question. Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to say, rewriting the general plan is something you probably don't want to do more than every 5 years, because it is, what it was, a year and a half, 2 years, the last time you did it. But does that mean that you don't want to have any changes made during those 5 years? Well, maybe you do. So to carve out a difference between opening the plan and making a whole review of everything, and opening it for a specific purpose, like Brandon mentioned, because someone is requesting a change in zoning that isn't allowed by the current map, that's something you may want to consider more often than every 5 years, particularly if it's a commercial development that would require changes to that map, and it's going to be very beneficial to the city. Do you really want to wait 5 years to make an answer to that? I don't know.
So we're talking
think about
something
that.
major, not
Well-
just a little.
Well, it'd be real specific too, Reed, right? What you're explaining would be something real specific, that this would complement the city, and we just didn't know that this would ever happen until someone comes in and requests it.
I think there are two elements to it.
Yeah.
That is, I think, one that really ought to be considered. The other one that you might think about, though, all the time since the city's been a city, you've had people come in for requests for changes in their zoning that's not allowed by the map, and wanting to open the general plan to change the map so that they could change their zoning. And you may want to have a certain period of time that you look at that, other than just 5 years. Maybe you say, okay, we'll consider those kind of petitions for residential changes that don't necessarily benefit the city, but we're only going to do it so often, every 2 years, maybe once between the 5-year time frame. That would make some sense to me, and then it's an easy answer if somebody comes in with a request like that, just to say, well, we'll consider that, but it's going to be here, not every time you come in with a request.
I kind of feel like that might be opening a can of worms. I worry about us painting ourselves into a corner if, even with, let's take, for example, the residential/commercial request that comes in. If you have a developer that comes in and says, if we have an ordinance that says, well, we're going to open the general plan and consider situations where somebody wants to do a commercial development and they want to attach some higher density housing to it. And you have a situation where maybe the land is zoned R1 and they say, okay, we want to put in this business and it's going to be significantly beneficial to the city. It's going to bring in a lot of revenue. And in exchange, we want to take it from R1, we want to go down to maybe 30-acre lots or something like that. And so we discuss it. We think, okay, this is worth it, the benefit that we're getting. And then down the road, you have somebody come in that wants to put in an area, let's say it's zoned R2, and they want to put in some townhomes, and they say, well, I'm going to throw in a gas station so that we can be considered commercial, and I want to be able to do this higher density. Does that not leave us open for, if we say no to them and we say yes to them, how specific are we going to get? Or do we just kind of say each individual case is up for review and we have to discuss the benefit to the community and decide case by case? I like having that flexibility versus having something that's so completely like, yes, boxed in. That's just a concern that I have if we're going to create an ordinance. Is that going to limit our power or our discernment?
So you're almost saying you like the benefit of even being more flexible than saying it's every 2.5 years. Just essentially, if somebody brings something in and it looks great, we want to be able to open it.
That's kind of how
I think
That's what it is now.
Yeah, that's what it is now.
And I think it's worked okay. I mean, we've had being able to look at something case by case. That's the whole purpose of having a commission and a council, because just like Val said, we can't anticipate some of these things that may come up down the road. And if our ordinance is too specific, we may end up in more trouble.
Yeah, the specific part that I was suggesting would be something that has nothing to do with commercial. If they're just wanting a residential change, do you want to be looking at that every time they make a request, or do you want to say, okay, we'll look at it every 2.5 years, and then at the time we redo the plan, and if they come in with any time other than that, you just say, we got to wait till then.
But is it sending the message that
Or if they
we're going to be
pop in.
more favorable during this time period?
No, not necessarily. It's just you're not going to
We
look
just
at it.
be doing what I hear about. Don't pay us the $500 because
Can we do
we're
that every
gonna
5
say
years?
no. We're
When
gonna
it's
say no.
open?
You can.
But I think to your point, if somebody came in and let's say it was every 2.5 years or whatever, but then they did come in and say, well, gee, I'm gonna put in this gas station. Well, I think then to your point, you could then consider they come pay their $500 and even though it's outside the 2.5 years, hey, if you want to put a gas station in here or something, let's take a look. And maybe you decide, but you still have the ultimate decision on it. You could say, you know what, that's not enough benefit right now, no. Or you could say, yeah, absolutely, that's awesome, let's do it. Or they want to put in a little strip mall or something, whatever.
I just
I
think
think you
we
can
need
still,
something separate for commercial versus residential.
and maybe so, maybe, yeah.
We can just say, well, this is commercial, it's bringing in benefit to the city, so let's look at this a little bit different than a residential development that isn't really, it's just gonna pull on our resources.
Yeah, and if they do, and if you were pushing more people to do the commercial/residential, I mean, that's good for the city. Like, because if you're saying, hey, residential, no, it's just every 2.5 years, don't even bother paying. But then that gets the message across to say, well, if we do a commercial/residential, we'll look at maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's pushing more commercial. Yeah, but in the spot you want it, you can always say no. Somebody comes in way out in the middle of nowhere saying, I want to do commercial way out here. You can say no, probably. But maybe it draws it to that area. So, anyway.
I think Brian had that, did you on your next slide, that kind of answered some of those
A little bit, yeah.
questions?
Yeah. So, I mean, really for the annual review, we wanted to, I mean, it's a little bit vague where it just says we'll do the annual review every year. I couldn't find where we said we do it in February, so I didn't know if we needed to tighten that down and say February Planning Commission's doing it, and then maybe March, city council does it, or is it just planning commission? You know, do we need a little bit
I
more
don't
in
think
there?
it's written in the general plan, it just says here in our strategies that we conduct an annual review of the general plan and a comprehensive review every 5 years at a static point in time to ensure that the goals and policies are attainable and consistent with the wishes of the community, and that's the planning commission's lead. And no, it doesn't say anything more than that, but we voted on that in one of our late fall meetings. The February would be
To
the
put it
month
on there.
when the planning commission, so I'm sure that's in our minutes. The February is the month when
Okay.
the planning commission is gonna look at, from our point of view, are we meeting the strategies, is there something we need to improve?
Okay.
Is, when you say open, not open the plan, open just.
Open
Open
reviewing-
discussion.
Open the map.
The discussion,
Just
okay.
Open discussion.
And I think it will, I mean, with all of those strategies in there, I mean, I think it's gonna take us more than a minute to go over those and see what's being done. That's why when we kind of talked about having maybe, I don't know, some subcommittees or something for each
Review
of those,
that.
like dividing it up and saying, okay, you're gonna look at the goals for trails and you're gonna look at the goals for land use or whatever it is that's in there, so that
Mm-hmm.
it just breaks it up, and maybe it's not the planning commission, then like city council, maybe we kind of work together with those
Okay.
little groups. I don't know, I just think that might be a little bit more proficient.
You may want a couple months anyway, because that lines right up with when the legislature shut every year, right toward the end of February. So you may want a couple months just to see, hey, did they do something?
Did they change?
Which they always do, but
You might
That's
want
a
more
good
than that,
point right
because
there.
we only meet once
they
a month.
always have
When
something.
they have, when we looked at Ludma up there, for example, or Ludma,
Yeah.
however you want to pronounce it, that has been a moving target now for 2 or 3 years, and it,
That's right.
By the time you open it up in February, the review, I mean, not the plan, but you had a sense of what might be coming
Yeah,
from
I mean,
them,
yeah,
and
sure.
then, you know.
We're gonna say, look at it, we're not,
Mm.
as a planning commission, we have no thoughts of opening it.
No, you're not opening.
Yeah.
When I said open, I mean open your review.
When the session's over.
I
Initiation.
think that's
Okay,
the
let's
point
talk
right
about our
there.
general plan, is it working for us, what do we need to do,
Yeah.
how are we lining up the way we should be?
Not sure all that is.
That's what. the planning
Mention that,
commission-
Reed. I think that's a really good
I think
point.
Well, I would just, based on all of this, you might want to open it, not open it, but review in March, once you know the legislature's.
What-
I
After
think
they're
that's
done.
probably a better idea.
So back it up to March.
And
So
should
that
that
we
be
get
like
that
a
new legislation and
discussion
think
meeting
about-
like this, or should it be a planning commission and a city council meeting? Like what works? What do we need?
You know, what would be good for our side would be to have you meet together and we can brief you on legislative changes all at
There
once,
you go.
I think that's a good idea.
for what that's worth.
Yeah.
And then you guys take as much time as you need, year by year, and maybe you need longer, 1 year.
I like not boxing it in. I mean, it may take us, you know, a good chunk of the year to go
Right.
through, but at least maybe we can work it into each of our meetings where, okay, we're gonna address this section in our next meeting, and are we
Okay.
meeting those goals? Do we need to do something different? So that it's just a work in progress. Going back to who opens the general plan, does the process begin with the planning commission or the city council? And maybe legal can explain this, but in the state code, and it's right in our general plan, it says every community is required to create a general plan, and it is the role of the planning commission to make a recommendation on the content of the plan to the governing body. And later on in that code, it goes through any revisions or the general plan itself. So I feel like we know where it starts off with by what we already have in the state law. Is that not right, or am I
That's
not
true.
understanding that correctly?
But I would think it would make sense if the city council has something they're concerned about, to send it down and have you look at it. Kind of like they did with the cell tower issue.
Yeah.
It came to them, they sent it down and said, hey, give us your thoughts on it. I think that's the way it ought to work.
And wasn't there something in the ordinance when you were reading it, Brian, that didn't sound like it was as clear as it should be?
Yeah, in our ordinance, not in the plan, but in the ordinance, it's like city council does this, but we felt like as staff, it should go planning commission to get their approval or disapproval, and then go to city council. That way, city council is just not making like decisions.
That's what you just read.
Right.
If it's
Amanda, that's-
state,
But
if
that's an
it's land issues, then the state law says, starts with the planning commission.
Yeah, but in our ordinance, it doesn't have that chiseled in there yet,
Yeah.
so.
I just didn't know if, I mean, there's been other things that have come up where we might not have had an ordinance, but as long as we're going by what the state law is, that covers us, right? Or do we have to have something specific that?
No, if the state law covers it, you have to live by the state law.
Yeah.
Even if you have an ordinance that says something different, you still have to live by the state law.
So maybe we should make our ordinance then in compliance with the state.
Yeah. That's
Well, do we need something in addition to that? What?
I don't.
Why
does
would
it-
we need an additional ordinance in addition to what you
Well, I guess
just
we
read?
already have one, was what, it's just not clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Let's look
and
at the law.
see.
If it's
Yeah.
saying something different than the state law,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the question, I guess, maybe you look at it on commercial and strictly residential. And commercial may be a combination of residential and commercial, but do you want to do anything other than each 5 years on the just residential? I guess that's the initial question.
I would say no.
I would vote no.
I feel like our plan says 5 years, unless it's something that's beneficial to the city, like significantly beneficial, which I look at commercial differently than I do residential. My feelings are no.
Well, that's a hard one to
They can
define
ask.
too, beneficial to the city, because the more houses you have, technically, the more revenue you have and so
Yeah.
forth. And the more expenses you have too.
Yeah.
Let's ask Public Works, is that true?
I just,
We know it's not.
So
they can always ask, but I don't like the idea of giving them a window where they can come in and say, or we say, okay, every 2 years, we're gonna look at opening a general plan for this time period. So all of you that want to do higher density housing can come in. I feel like that's kind of sending a message that, well, we don't really mean what we said in here. We're willing to consider what we've got. And if we really don't think that residential higher density residential fits in line with this, I don't know why we would do that. I mean, every 5 years, I think that if they take part in the process where we do the open houses and we send out, I feel like we did that, and the voice of the community was overwhelming that they didn't want higher density. So I feel like it would be disrespectful to do that if we've told them every 5 years we're going to. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. So
I agree. One thing we talked about a midpoint that might be a happy medium. If you just
For who?
for midpoint.
Between our developer and our citizenship,
Yeah,
I would go with citizenship every time.
I do too.
yeah.
I don't think we need to. find
Well,
a
that's why
happy
we
medium
wanted
for the
discussion. We
developers.
didn't know how people
Yeah.
felt.
So the people.
What if the developer is a citizen?
which they usually
Yeah.
are, the landowner
can
is the
still
business
develop.
citizen.
Right? I mean, this is the same issue I think we've had for a long time, that we have people that say, well, you're not letting me develop my land. And I don't believe there's anybody that's served that has said that that's the case. If it's zoned R1, develop it R1 all you want. But as far as taking it to a higher density, I don't feel like it's the city's job to broker that deal and at the expense of the city. I mean, like I said, if there's a time where it would be significantly beneficial to the city, then I would do that differently, and I think that kind of goes along with the mixed use with commercial. But I don't feel like we're ever telling somebody they can't develop their land.
No, I don't think we ever have. They maybe don't get their way in how it's going to be developed, but we haven't disallowed development anywhere.
No, and you can't.
No.
No, and I don't think that would be right either.
That's, they have their rights as landowners, but they have to operate within the rules that the city has set. And our city has set a general plan that says development in this area is 1 acre, 3/4 acre, and ½ acre.
I know people get
Play those
frustrated because they can broker a deal with someone if they can get us to change
Well, and
the
that's
zoning and
that
they
almost
get a
always
higher
happens.
price.
A developer will come in and say, well, if you can get this changed to
Yeah.
½ acre lots, man, I can double your money.
And that's when they say that they can't sell their land, and it's like, no, you can, I'm sure there's someone that would buy it and whatever, but us brokering a deal for you is not part of our job.
So I guess we're just talking residential. I guess maybe it was initiated maybe by city staff wondering if we would want to make a change. Because as it sits right now, people just come in whenever they want to. And if we don't make any change, I assume that would just continue, right? They would just, at any time, someone would just come in and say, here's what, and if they want to pay, then it's on the agenda.
Yeah, so just kind of split this. Item number 1, we wanted to maybe define a little bit or find out, do we need to define what happens in the annual review and how that looks. Sounds like that's probably pretty good, but maybe we need to just clarify that. Second thing was opening by the landowner. So somebody wants to come in, and so our questions process begins with the planning commission or the city council. It looks like it begins with planning commission. I put city council up there, but it's planning commission. And then the length of the opening, and it's not really clearly stated. So we're thinking maybe we just have it open for that 1 month, that somebody comes in and says, I want to open it. And that one instance.
Otherwise,
One month, how soon do you have to put out your public agenda? I mean,
24
if you
hours.
only have, is it 10 days you have to have something
Well, the
posted?
notice.
The notice?
Yeah, it's 10 days.
And we only meet once a month, is that enough time, I guess, is what I'm questioning.
Well,
It might be.
I mean, do we
Yeah.
really have to have a time frame for them? They're smart people. They can look at it. If they need to work on it for more than a month, we should let them do that.
But as far as submitting an application, you need to give them a window
For them,
of time frame to submit an application.
so you mean if somebody comes in and they say, we want you to open the general plan, they pay the fee, are you meaning if other people want to come in too, leaving it open? Because I would rather see it, if they want to come in and pay the fee, we decide that we're going to open it, we open it for that individual, and then we close it. And you guys have to do work when somebody requests this, right? So I think everybody that requests it should have to pay that fee. I don't think it's fair that one developer has to pay it and
Yeah.
everybody else piggybacks
I
off
agree
of that.
with that.
Yeah, that's part of this whole thing. Right now, we don't ask on our form the benefit to the city. I think that'd be a great thing to put on there. The difference between residential and commercial, right now we don't distinguish that. It's just if you would like to open the general plan, we just have one form. We're thinking that for residential, have it only open as you guys decide, whether that be, sounds like every 5 years, just open residential every 5 years, but then for commercial, have that open whenever it comes up, whenever it's proposed.
I'm okay with them still requesting during that time. If they feel like they want to come in and request it, I think that should be the same, whether
For
it's
residential.
residential or commercial, but we don't say every 2 years, if you have a residential
It gets
request,
open.
that it gets opened automatically.
Okay.
So that kind of
Well,
brings up
if
a
you're
question.
never going to grant it, is it fair to ask them to pay a fee?
That's true.
I don't think,
Maybe
it's
it's a
the
great
same as it's always
benefit.
been for a rezone, right? Like when people have come in when we had the R2 overlay, and we didn't always grant those, and people knew that it was up for discussion, it had to go before the council and the commission. It would be the same thing if they want, it's a gamble, but
Mhm.
the staff has to do work if they make that request. It would probably discourage them from coming in, but at least we're not saying you can't. I mean, it's the general mindset that we're not doing this.
But I feel like that little bit there is kind of in conflict with our planning commission's attitude towards, we really want to hold hard and fast to our general plan. We don't want to waver back and forth and say, well, maybe.
Legally, can we say that? Can we say absolutely no requests for 5 years? Is that?
In that sense, because in that sense, you'd almost be better off saying, don't bother.
I mean, if we
with
can legally
just
do that,
residential.
then I'm okay
We're
with
only
that.
required to open it every 5 unless the legislature, passes something to say that we're out of bounds somehow, with
Yeah.
what we're doing, then we're gonna have to. But
I think that's great.
And that's,
If we can say that.
we're trying to comply with state requirements here by having this general plan, making it a 5-year plan. To have a request come in that wants to develop in the R1 and make it R2,
But
it's almost gonna be an automatic no.
if we make the allowance saying, well,
Well, if it's going to be an automatic no, I don't think you're justified in taking $500.
I agree.
All right.
I agree. I think we
That's
should.
we need
And
to
I don't know
change.
about recently, but in the past, I know the city staff has warned people hey, this is probably not gonna happen, and people have still been willing to pay it.
Mhm.
So if the city staff gives them kind of a,
Maybe they have to sign some kind of a disclaimer and say, I understand that, this may.
it already says right on it, this fee is non-refundable.
Right.
But again, if we say no residential, but we'll allow it if there's commercial attached to it, and then the scenario comes up that I talked about earlier, and we say, okay, well, it's okay for this commercial because this is a good enough benefit to the city and it's not okay for this commercial because this is, like, I mean, is that still up to our
Who
discretion?
makes
and we're
that
okay with
judgment,
that?
right? Who
Well,
finally
that's
makes that
essentially what we
call?
do all the time anyway.
Okay.
And that would be, if you're gonna say only residential, don't bother, you might as well do that, if that's what everybody decides. But if it's connected to commercial, I think that's different.
But we don't want somebody coming in saying, hey, I got these storage units and
Maybe
four-story
though,
apartment
maybe you
buildings.
do, if it's a big, I don't know. Who knows?
You can still say no to that.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that, like,
Yeah.
we just still have that
But-
discernment. We can't
But
just
like
say.
Brandon said,
mhm.
if it's
They-
purely residential and you're asking for a zone change, well, general plan is not open, then I would highly discourage it, is my opinion. But if it's a commercial something, and maybe says some residential attached to it, then yes, we need to look at that, because that's gonna benefit the city. And that's why the planning commission and the city council are here, is to help benefit the city, so.
You know, I think it's
We
more
can't
than the
just close our
benefit to the
minds.
city you wanna look at. You keep saying that, but I think the main goal ought to be benefit the people in the city.
Well,
I think
Well,
that's what
You know,
I
we're not
mean
talking
when I say
about revenue
city.
to the city, I
No.
don't think. We're talking about what's best for the citizens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have,
I
we have
think
to look
that's
at them
what we need.
most, I think, more than anything else is the citizens,
Yeah.
because they're the ones who we're looking for.
Yeah, I think just kind of keep that in mind. We're
Right.
not here
And-
saying,
and
if you don't
don't-
pay
yeah.
us a bunch of money to the city, then we're not gonna do
No,
it. Is this a
sorry.
good thing for the city,
I was
for the
being
people?
misinterpreted.
Hopefully
When I
that
said-
money
I
will
said
benefit the
city,
people
I'm
that live
talking
in
about
the
the
Well,
city.
yeah,
citizens.
that's true, that's true too.
Mhm.
But there are other benefits too.
Yeah, just not
If you have
having
two
to
gas
drive.
stations, it's maybe better than one.
Mhm.
So you don't think we need to take that, or make that in our ordinance that we will only open residential every 5 years? Just kind of leave it as it is, but maybe just define the opening,
Talk about that,
If we,
maybe be more flexible with commercial.
yeah.
okay?
Well, and is this, are you coming up with something that's gonna be like on an agenda or something, or, cause we're not making decisions right now.
Right.
just talking.
We're just kicking around some ideas on
So-
what we need to do to make some decisions in order to kind of clarify either a process or our ordinance.
I like what they said about no residential until we open it the 5-year mark. And we consider, we're a little bit more flexible with commercial,
Commercial.
since it would benefit.
Yeah, maybe that's what we do is we split it up in the ordinance and say the residential only gets opened every 5 years, and then the commercial, you know, as I don't want to say as needed. What's the word? I'm
Case by
looking
case.
for?
Yeah, whenever it comes in, I think whenever it comes in, I
Yeah.
just look at it.
Because we still have the option to weigh if the commercial's really that beneficial.
Mhm.
Yeah, now and I guess your 5-year prohibition would be tempered with this annual review that you're going to do, because again, if you see something from the state, that we would have to do it anyway, but it would be a way to catch that. If something
Okay.
comes from the state in any particular year, say, well, wait a minute, okay, we do need to make a change on a residential review.
Yeah.
And I think it probably is important to be a little bit specific when we say we'll look at commercial. That needs to include commercial that includes mixed use with maybe some residential as part of the entire project, so that we're not saying, okay, we're gonna consider the commercial part of your request, but the residential is
Mhm.
automatically denied. It's like a package that goes together, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
what about this? What if, it's more like a legal thing, if someone comes in, they're like, oh, I've got this great commercial thing, but I need this residential thing too, and then we grant it, but then they only do the residential thing. Is there some way to tie, like, okay, well, you have to
Well, it's
do,
part of a project. You don't.
Yeah, so you would, it would be like.
it would be approved as like a joint process. But like, is there anything we can do if they never do that commercial thing?
Just wouldn't approve the commercial.
Tie that in with
Or
our
the
phase
residential,
one.
if they don't do the
Yeah.
commercial.
There you go.
That could all be in the developer's
But-
agreement.
Yeah, we put together
Is that-
an agreement.
Doesn't that tie together like
Yeah.
in your phases? You'd say, phase 1, you have to do this before you can get this.
We
Yeah,
tie-
I mean, as
like-
long as we could do something like
Yeah, I
that.
don't think you ought to leave that loophole open.
Yeah, so we put together a development agreement, some kind of pretty specific, I would think.
Perfect.
Now, generally speaking, who knows what could happen in any specific situation. But generally speaking, all that stuff's going to be interconnected for that developer, so they're going to want both those components to make the other one work.
Mhm.
I think I think you just answered my question. Is it more likely than not that if someone wants to put some kind of business here, they want to add higher density to, I mean, is that hasn't always been the case, but is that how it is today? I mean, if I
Well, I think yours has to
I
be factored into what the cost is of doing that commercial development.
like
And that kind of flows back to your public works folks. If they've got to put in expensive improvements like pump stations, then you got to consider what they can do to make that economically feasible.
So who's going to pay for the pump station if the commercial can't pay for it alone, right?
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you may be losing out on any kind of commercial because they may go somewhere else that can accommodate helping them put it in a little better. If you're going to be that hard-nosed on it, that may prohibit them from coming here, I think would be the theory at least.
Well, a place like Hooper would be a little harder. There's no doubt, just coming out here is a little harder. I think I mentioned before, sometimes we're compared to other cities where they come in and want to put in a business, but all the infrastructure is already there, so that's not as big a problem. You come out in Hooper and you want to put in a business, you're building everything from ground up. We may have to put in sewer and secondary and culinary water and sidewalk, where other cities, all that's already in place. So I guess you just have to take that case by case. If they come in with a business, and in order for this business, whoever is going to develop a business, in order for him to be willing to do that, he wants to attach to this another.
It just depends on what
pack.
it is.
Yeah, it just depends.
Like what Sheldon says, some guy comes in and says, I want to put in, 25 storage units, but to do it, I need to have 5,000 townhomes. Probably going to say no to that. But if it's some other scenario where they say, I won't put in this, big old thing, but I need some help with density, maybe that's different to you guys.
Other things real quick on here. I think we've already kind of addressed this. Right now, the plan says, once it's open, it's open. So we are thinking have it be open solely for the petitioner, and then once they talk about their thing, it gets closed. Sounds like that's what everyone's kind of.
If a secondary come in at the same time, they would pay the fee, and we keep it open for them as well, right?
That's what we're. Yeah,
That's
because
the
right now it
question.
just says, person A could come in and open it, and then person B and C could just say, well, it's open. You guys opened it.
But they would still have to pay the fee. I would agree with that.
Yeah, right now it doesn't really define that, but we would like to tweak the language so it says each petitioner pays the 500, and that way it's open for person A, closed, open for person B, closed, open for person C, closed.
Yeah.
That sounds the fair way, because we were wondering if 3 people wanted to come in and one person pays for it and the other 2 are freeloaders.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Or does the city supposed to divide that by how many people are coming in? Or, like,
Well, the difference,
this is,
it's not like opening a box, and once the box is open, you can do everything there. Each project is going to require staff time to analyze it and decide whether it's good or not. So it seems to me like each one's somewhat individual.
Well, plus what if the person A pays the 500, the other 2 piggyback, person A gets denied, we're not going to do it for you, but we're going to do it for, but thanks for
Right.
paying our $500 fee for us, so it just doesn't, I think it has to
Yeah.
be specific.
so we thought we should probably have some better language in there so it makes it clear that
Yeah.
each petitioner pays for that to be open.
But the verbiage would be that it's per review, not open, right?
Correct. Yeah. And then the last thing we thought was that we probably need to define is opening by the city. So once we decide, like if whenever something happens, like maybe there's a change that happens, or maybe there's a commercial that's being proposed, or whatever the scenario. I can't even think of anything right now, but as the city deems it necessary to open that, then how does that process work? And we'd like to have that as an option. That way we're not stuck to saying, well, the developers can only ask to open this every 5 years, but the city has to wait also every 5 years. If there's a reason why to open that up, like maybe some big park gets put in and we need to change some residents on the edges or
Like
something.
Brandon said, we never know what the state legislature's gonna come up with.
Yeah,
And all the
also.
time they'll come up with something that's gonna require us to modify our general plan before 5 years has elapsed. So, yes, city council should be able to open the general plan if deemed if necessary, based on state legislature or something to that effect.
And I think our state, I think that code covers that, whether the city council finds a need and they send it to the planning commission makes a recommendation and sends it up to the city council.
Okay.
I feel like
It's covered, but
We're covered.
the challenge he has, I guess, is people might look at the ordinances and not at the code, and then they get confused. So they ought to be consistent. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, we just kind of want to hammer out whatever it feels and try to get a little bit better method on here and make sure we're all on the same page with opening the general plan.
So one question I kind of have still, and I'm pretty involved in some of this, but are they coming to ask to open the plan? Or are they bringing a,
They don't know what they're doing. All they want to do is have you change the map so they can change their zone.
right,
They don't know whether you call that opening the plan or what you call it, but that's what they want. I think generally.
But it's just for that project, if that's your question. If they're not opening it in that sense. Like, when we keep talking about opening the plan for somebody, we're not opening the general plan in that sense generally, that anybody can just pop in and make proposals. It's just for that project.
so
And
should we call that something else, I guess is my question, because
Yeah.
asking the council or the commission to open the general plan
Well, that's what I
is
was saying,
different than
review.
bringing an idea to them.
Exactly, that's
wouldn't
what I
it be
was
like an
saying,
amendment
review,
maybe to the general plan?
pay the fee to have it reviewed, and then if it's approved, then you open it. So that's.
Because you couldn't change the plan without opening it correctly, but you could hear an idea and say, no, we're not willing to open the plan for that.
I don't know if you call it technically
Well-
amending the general plan, or, I mean, you are opening for that project.
You see what I mean? There's kind of to hear somebody's idea is different than actually opening the plan to make changes.
And then on
Well, you have
piggyback
to
on
change
that,
the plan. And,
Right.
and I guess is that what opening means, is to change the plan, I guess. But you're not opening it for anything other than that specific thing.
Well, to me, it's two different steps. It's reviewing it, and if you want to change it, then you open it.
I guess,
That's
yeah,
how I
lots of
look at it.
semantics. I mean, if they're petitioning for a review of their project, and you're gonna say, okay, we'll review your project.
Yeah.
And if we agree, we'll open it and
Yeah.
shut it. But
And
it's
what-
all kind of the same.
what else is kind of a little cumbersome for us, for staff, is, they come up with an idea, we say, okay, maybe we review it, say, yeah, that could work. They come and ask to open the plan or to amend the plan, the future planning map. We close that, so they pay the $500. Then they gotta come next month to petition to change from what it was to what it can be now. So it's like, should that be incorporated in the same step? Or does that work to have
I've
it?
seen other cities do that, but I'd like the idea
Like
of
it
having
separate?
more separate and more chance for citizen input.
I do too.
Okay,
So we're not going to, even if we do change the general plan at some point, we're not going to rezone it in the same meeting. They'll have to apply after it's changed.
yeah, because we could, when they come for pay to open the plan, we could incorporate the changing of it and notify those within the 300 feet. That way, we get everyone kind of at one swoop. Or does it make sense to see if the city will open it and change it, and then change it, and then the next month notify the 300 residents, and then they come and say, "Wow, why did I get changed? Like, what were you guys thinking?" Like
You guys have to notify them for both of those, right?
for the opening, no,
Really?
correct,
Just a normal notice.
Huh.
yeah.
But like I said, I've seen Roy specifically will open it, change it,
So,
change zoning, rezone.
for instance, this last planning commission, we had the Tor Gately property. The notice that went out was just the agenda that said they're on the agenda.
Well, I think you're getting into a dangerous spot if you make changes in the general plan and then later on tell people,
I agree.
this is what
Yeah.
we've done, and you've got to rezone because they meet the requirements. Once you change that map, the general plan, if they qualify, you've got to let them change their zoning.
Mhm.
So if you're going to get comments from the people, it better be at a meaningful time.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it needs to be at the same maybe that fee needs to be increased so that it covers your time
Plus
for having to
those.
look at both
Mhm.
of those fees.
Or
I don't
maybe
know. I
we
don't
just
know
put
how to
those
do
two
that,
together and
because
put-
it's not a guarantee, but
I know it's $500 to open the plan, and then I think it's $200 plus mailers for
reason.
rezone. So maybe we just combine
Just
those
combine the two.
into one process.
Yeah.
The average citizen doesn't have any idea what it means to open the plan or close the plan. All they know is if they change the zoning, you're gonna build on smaller lots. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you don't wanna confuse the public. So I think it's better to do it together, frankly.
Okay. Yeah, and right now we don't have that. So again, you know, we just want to make this process a little bit more defined, clearer, easier to understand. So that helps out. Does that answer all your questions for now?
Yeah.
You know, Brandon Marie, do you have any more?
Well, I guess the question is where to from here. Sounds like we've got probably at least a good number of the planning commission folks.
We have everybody.
Oh, everybody. Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
We don't have that for the council. We
No.
only got two of them.
Do we want to put it, so I guess the next question is, process-wise, do we put it on the February planning commission meeting for you guys to make a formal vote on recommendation? Then,
Recommendation
or do you do?
on
or
the
do you-
process.
Yeah, just on some of the stuff we chatted
Mhm.
about, because I think you need to actually vote and recommend it. Council, is that
I agree, if we can get it on
the
the
next,
February
is the
meeting.
next one, are we gonna do it even faster than that? I don't know if there's any reason to do it faster than that, but I'm sure we can do it then.
Because we only meet once a month, we should
Yeah.
definitely try and get it on the February
Yeah,
meeting.
February.
There may be times where you have to meet more.
Closest.
So after the changes in the law this year,
That's a possibility too. Just meet again.
so you can meet at the end of the month, if you want.
And that was one of my questions too. I was just questioning the urgency of this meeting, like, because I feel like it's really important we have the input of the city council, and not many of them could make it. I know I had to really juggle some things to get here today, but it seemed like we had to have this done before Thursday. Do you know why?
We just was concerned because that it came before your Thursday meeting, as someone wanting to, and we said no. Then we thought, okay, but if someone comes next and we said yes, we just looking through the ordinances, they're gray areas. And we just barely went through a city litigation, and we don't want that happening again. We want to make sure everything is so clear, clean cut, that we have everything in our ordinance, so we're not telling somebody no. The next person comes and it happens to be a commercial that would be beneficial to the city, and we say to them yes. We want to have something defined that that's all right. That's all right if you look at it, review it, city council looks at it, reviews it, and we say yes, this would be beneficial to the city, this necessarily wouldn't be. So we're not having someone come back and say, well, you told us no, well, why are you telling them yes? So
And that makes
that
sense
was
to
the
me.
reasoning.
I just
Yeah.
didn't know why it had to absolutely
Yeah,
happen
and-
before Thursday, because I feel like it's important. Something of this magnitude,
Yeah.
like if we could get everybody's input on it, I think we could move it through even
Well, I
more
think now,
quickly, but
now that we've met today, I like the idea of bringing this up in February at our meeting.
Yeah.
We get some predefined bullet points and vote on it, and then pass it to the city council for their end of February meeting.
And you can talk about it at the pre-meeting on Thursday, what's been discussed here, and
Mhm.
But there's
Might get
nothing
some
on the
feedback from
agenda.
them.
There's nothing on the agenda
We
for
haven't done- we
Thursday.
haven't
not on
done
the,
the
not on the
agenda
council
yet.
agenda.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
city
fine.
No, it would
council,
just be
yeah.
the
We'll do the
Mhm.
agenda today, or get it sent out.
Okay, then I think you have to,
Already,
in February, get up to the council, we could probably that latter meeting in February, have it kind of in place.
Yeah, we hadn't done the agenda yet because we're kind of waiting to see the discussion today, if, you know, what we needed to put on Thursday's agenda or the work meeting that we needed to talk about, so. Well, does anybody else have any other input, I feel like this has been a good discussion. I don't know that we always have a time to sit down and talk about this, so any other things? Bryant, did you have anything?
Oh, there's more
Alex, or-
coming. We need to change a lot of different ordinances, but this was a great place to start. And
Speaking of ordinances, isn't there a state law, we had to have something done by February, we had to have our ordinances all tidied up?
That's why I mentioned that second planning commission meeting, the requirement is that you give some kind of an answer within a defined period of time. It may,
We can go
Required that you
over,
meet.
right, if we're working,
well, you don't have to decide, but you have to consider it.
yeah,
Uh,
because we have the cell
But if,
phone.
but if they made an application the day after your meeting, you'd have to meet before your next meeting to get the answer to them in the time the state requires. So there may be, and it depends on what's filed. But if something is filed and there's not enough time to wait until your next meeting, then you're gonna have to have another meeting.
February 1st is the one deadline for the subdivision, which we
We're
contacted.
working on that.
Yeah.
So. It's in the process.
What about the cell tower?
So we're hopefully, city council and I'm gonna remind them that we wanna talk about that so we can have something Thursday, at least one of those plans, because we've been sent several that we can then give
Yeah, there's-
recommendations for an ordinance.
Hopefully we'll get some good suggestions from
Yeah.
them and by the next meeting have an ordinance that they can take a look at.
Mhm. Yeah.
And a lot of those things that I think all of you suggested are part of all of that. But it's a little more complicated than just a list of items, because they kind of interact. Some of these cities have passed 30-page ordinances just relating to this. And I don't know that we want to do that. We want to make sure, I don't know, if you've looked over all those things we sent you, there's a lot there. So it's not a simple matter of saying these are the 5 points and put them in. You've got to do it in the right way. But it's in process.
But that's why we have you.
Well, we do need it, because otherwise we're gonna get those, conditional use permit applications at the commission. I mean, you guys need something to the point that can say, well, no, we can't, or, yeah, we can, but this is the process or parameter.
I think that's positive. But keep in mind, there are a lot of cities that don't have anything. Roy is a good example. They have nothing. And they handle it by their planning commission taking a look at it when it comes in, deciding whether it meets the requirements for a building.
So some of this goes along with the second thing I had on the agenda about talking about possibly increasing the number on our planning commission. Because we realize from some of these state mandates, the importance of the planning commission. Just like we talked about with this new SB 174, some of the moderate income housing. There's now the 12-day turnaround from the time they submit it. Then, so as we talked about, I know you did at your last meeting about possibly having 2 meetings a month trying to get some of this fit in. There's a new governor's initiative. I don't know if any of you have been following it yet. He's $149 million to try to have some, they don't call them starter homes anymore. Back in our day, they were called starter homes. And which again is why some of this we're talking about, because there may be some requirements coming down from the state as far as having some smaller lots.
What are they calling them?
It's like first-time home buyers.
Yeah, and then they're really referring to starter homes, but he's putting a lot of money into that, and there's a lot of bills, which again would be good if we had, the voting people on this League of Cities. Anyway, so and another thing too, when we look at most of the places where some of this commercial, higher density, we currently do not have any representation on our city council that is anywhere north of 4,000 or east of 5,900. So we maybe need to have some representation. So you look at where all of you live, and maybe that east end of Hooper, maybe it would be helpful to have someone on our planning commission that did live in that area, or even north. And I went through, and not that I need to read all these to you because it really doesn't matter, but there's only one other city in Weber County that has 5. And everybody else has 6, 7, even 9. Sometimes they will have alternates. The alternates come to the meeting and they only vote if there is someone missing. So I just wondered it's something to discuss, not anything that we will be deciding, but for you to think about that if there is going to be added work, if there's possibly going to be 2 meetings a month, which might make it difficult, if it might be beneficial to have, maybe say we have 7 people on planning commission and have 1 alternate, even 6 and 1 alternate. Another thing too, I think Mary should have a vote. You look at the state code, it does say they do have a vote. I don't know if specifically in our ordinances it says you don't have a vote, but I think that would be something beneficial. But anyway.
My understanding was that the the chairperson only voted in the case of a tie.
Yeah, I was
So
just
that's
reading
why
the,
it's important to break a tie.
yeah, I was reading the state code
Just
and
like
it
the
said
vice
that you
president
do,
in the Senate.
yeah.
And, okay, so we had 7 commissioners for quite a while and then got, what?
Commission or council?
No, that was on the council, I think.
No,
No,
there was,
there was
Didn't we
commissioners.
have
Seven commissioners and then-
Don't we have 2 alternates?
and then
Am I
we cut it,
misremembering?
we had a hard time getting everybody to show up, so and then I think it was like 5 were a quorum or whatever, so we cut it back to 5, and I think it was maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, no, I served on the commission longer ago than that, and it was only 5.
I think you're right.
It was
It was
right.
7, it was 7, and then it was
The
like.
council
never
changed,
getting
that's been
everybody to show up.
trouble.
Yeah, the
I've been
council,
like
the council changed,
Yeah,
the
it was
commission.
during Corey, it was when
It-
Corey
it-
was the mayor, it changed, yeah.
It was 7, that's right. And then
Yeah.
it was-
And then,
But you could still not have to have 5 for a quorum, you could still have it be your 3 or 4 for a quorum, but then maybe that gives a little more flexibility if you're having to have more meetings and not having
yeah,
as
and
many.
maybe- and
have to
that's
have
why
there.
it was changed before, was because we,
We could never get a quorum.
the limit was.
couldn't ever get a
We
quorum.
couldn't get a quorum because it was 7,
Couldn't
and
get
we
5
couldn't get
people.
5
Yeah.
people to show up.
Well, I've been
Yes.
on for 4 years now, or whatever it's been, and I was attending meetings for 2 years before that, and I can't think of a time that the planning commission had to be canceled for not having enough people.
Right.
Yeah,
If
well,
you did,
I also look at your list of cities here, and I wonder what the population density is
I
of
actually have
us
that.
compared to those cities.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
went through.
well, if you look at like
Utah.
Marriott, Slaterville and Harrisville and their, Washington Terrace, I mean, some of those are comparable.
There's 14 Utah cities with 5 acting planning commission members. And if you look at population, Kaysville City, they have 5 and 1 alternate. They have a population of 33,000. Let's see, so.
What is
Har-
Hooper's population?
It's around 10,000, not quite.
No.
But
So
most would
they're
be, I mean, the last
over 3
census.
times bigger.
So Harrisville, Fruit Heights, West Bountiful, South Weaver, Enoch, Washington City. I mean, some of these may sound like they're smaller, but Washington City has a population of 31,000. Grantsville, Mapleton, Salem, South Jordan. South Jordan has 6, but they have a population of 80,000. Ivans, their population is close to ours. They have 5. Vernal has 5, and they have 2 alternates. Providence, Cedar Hills. So there are cities, quite a few. I mean, I would say that are comparable to us, and maybe even quite a bit bigger in population that have been functioning with 5. Another point would be that prior to this legislation that's passing, the city council, who's a 5-member council, has handled these things. And now I know a lot of that is probably going to fall on the planning commission. I would rather see 2 meetings a month than add additional council members. I don't see how that lowers our workload. I think it changes the vote, but I don't think that it lowers our workload.
I agree.
So I agree.
We can find that on the planning commission.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see a need for increasing the number of planning commission members, but I do see where we probably should plan on.
2 meetings.
Which I don't love either, but
Well, but
we might need to.
if we go out there and put out that we're gonna have 2 meetings a month and we don't have anything that second,
And it just gets canceled.
Yeah.
It's just
It's like what the
happened.
council.
Council has oftentimes, they have nothing on their agenda, so we cancel.
I think that's a better way to go
We
myself
probably should
too.
plan on the first and third, or second, fourth.
Yeah,
I mean,
starting in March, so that I don't miss the February one. It's not a-
Well, and maybe you can just see too when it comes down, and if it does seem to be more, this was just a discussion, just a thought, and I think sometime it would be good to have representation from the east end of Hooper. Because I think a lot of the things that we'll be deciding, you look at the commercial zoning, a lot of it is up in their direction, and I think it would be beneficial to have somebody up that place, because like I said, we don't have anybody, and it really is east of 5900.
I used to live on 4425, and I have a lot of friends. I lived there for 10 years. And my uncle lives right there on the very east end of Hooper as well. Got a lot of friends from high school. So I don't know that implying that anybody else that doesn't now or hasn't currently lived back there doesn't care about those citizens. That
Oh,
seems
sure you
pretty.
care. No, I'm not saying that you don't care. I'm just saying sometimes it's nice to
No,
have.
but it's just the appearance probably.
You guys.
Yeah.
And
No,
ultimately, you
everybody's
guys make a
west of
decision. We just make
four-way.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
And if you did increase and you did them as alternates, it wouldn't mess with the quorum requirement. Because you could have, if you had, just hypothetically, if you had two that were alternates, that would be 7 people available, but would really only be 5 voting members, which means 3 is a quorum, so.
Like I said, I don't even know, like, I would have to see a consistent, like, missing of people to even need that. And I don't know, like, do they get paid as alternates for showing up to the meeting?
I don't know. Probably.
I
Yeah,
think you'd have to pay them.
Yeah, you can do it once, so it's like, we're adding an additional cost
Yeah.
that I don't know that we have a need for at all.
And I don't, unless we're getting pushback or something from citizenry that's saying, hey, we're not represented in this end of the city, that, the current council is biased towards the west end of the city. Unless we're getting that, I don't see a need to change it.
And I mean, wouldn't we even need like some sort of ordinance that says we have to have like districts or something like that? Like something that says we have to have some sort of unit?
Has their districts, but
I mean,
But I'll tell you what, as our terms expire, and it's up to the mayor to make those new planning commission recommendations, so then she can recommend somebody from the east side.
Well,
when's
like,
your turn up?
I have no idea, because somebody put me in halfway.
Oh,
You're up at the end of this year.
When is my term?
I think it's
Up for it,
2025. I think it's 25. I'd have to look. I have it on the sheet. Thank you and Sheldon, yeah.
What does that mean? It turned your hat on backwards.
Visual
Catcher's mask. Now you put a catcher's mask.
He's enthusiastic.
so the last thing on the agenda then is I would like to have a quarterly meeting with City Council and Planning Commission. I think it's good to try to have a meeting where everybody can get together and discuss. I don't know that we always do those. Certainly, we'll have more notice. Date and time maybe can be more of an agreeable time for everybody. So that's something that I would like to do in the future. So, and I don't know if anybody that came to the meeting has any comments, anything you would like to ask or add? Or?
I think it's a good idea to have a joint collaboration meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quarterly, something like that, we can plan on it, have a joint meeting.
Yeah.
Fifth Thursday.
Huh?
The fifth Thursday.
That would be
That's
quarterly,
what our-
pretty much.
That's what our.
I like the meeting, is it possible to do it, the council gets together a half hour before their meeting, we get together a half hour, maybe we go an hour before, and just kind of make sure everybody's on the same page and we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys come to almost every planning commission, almost every,
Yeah, unless we're out of town.
unless you're out of town,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
could you make like a 5:30?
sure.
6 o'clock, because then we'd have them representation.
And
If you want to
more
see.
people could come.
And you may not need us all the time.
Yeah,
Depends
that's
on what
true.
you're talking about.
If we're talking about you, then
Show up.
I just would not be.
Okay, well, anything else anybody has? So, okay, I think there's some direction then, and like I said, we can talk about it further Thursday.
Mhm.
Some of these things we've discussed, and
You want some of them to come Thursday or not?
we're gonna start having an hour work meeting just because there's a lot of things to discuss, so you're always welcome.
Before city council
So,
on Thursday?
yeah,
So
Yeah.
6 instead of.
6 instead of 6:30. Mm-hmm, yeah. So, sure, but everybody's always welcome to come. And then we'll let you know, and then again, back to this, this legislative counts, what did we call it again? Let me go to the beginning. The Legislative Policy Committee, if anybody's interested, because I really think we should have 3 people on there. So, and if our last one listed, like I said, is Jared Chrysler, that we're a little outdated from having someone on there.
And my guess is those meetings are ones where they go through every piece of legislation that's come up since the last meeting related to cities, and then the group as a whole takes a position on it that then is forwarded to the legislature.
I
think that's probably-
I've been sitting in on it, I just haven't been a voting member.
Oh, if you can sit in, you want
Why
to.
don't you be a voting member?
If you're sitting in on it, yeah.
Did you say you can attend by Zoom?
You can attend by Zoom.
Even if you're a voting member?
Yes, yes, they had it both down in Salt Lake, or, yes,
Yeah.
by
so
Zoom you can be a
I
voting
can do
member.
it, cause I've been on,
What was that reason?
Cindy and I were both doing the, sitting in on the legislation, so.
Mhm.
Well, the thing that's helpful, I think, is they'll explain the legislation, so by the time it passes, you've heard it discussed, and all the arguments for and against, and you know exactly what you need to do.
Right.
So it's helpful to do
Right,
that.
and then they tell you who to contact as far as, in the Senate, that you don't want this.
Yeah, there is some politicking too.
Yeah, there was, so.
Terry, do you have the dates of that again, the legislative?
Mhm. So the first one is January 22nd, and all of them are from 12 to 1:30. So there's the 22nd, 29th, and then February 5th, 12th, 20th, 26th. And all those are in February, but all from 12 to 1:30. So I think it'd be, and like they said, anybody can go or listen in on them, and if you're interested, I can always send you those Zoom links, but three of us can vote. So I think we should. And one thing, and I know you're already all more familiar with this, but I've been listening to just nonstop meetings that are even back from the Utah leagues, and it's a lot. But I think the more we're involved with that, and the more we know, the more it benefits our city. So I think it really is something we need to be involved with. So yeah, Okay.
Are you attending as a voting member?
I'm going to attend as a voting member. Yeah. And Debbie, you said you want to be a voting member,
Yes.
so we
And
do
that's
need.
with the Utah League, or
It's with the Utah League, but it's the Legislative Policy Committee. So, but it's through the Utah League of Cities and Towns to do them. So, we need one more voting member for every, so we can have staff, anybody. But anyway, let me know if you want to before that, January 22nd, and we'll put it down, so, yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your day, and really appreciate all you do, so, thank you.